and welcome back to your course on communications. In this video today, I want to talk about the definition we're going to use for communication. Now, this definition will help us be able to communicate about communication at the same rate, at the same time, using the same definition, so to speak. But I also want to encourage you to take this definition with you as you leave the course and use it as a touchstone so that you can determine whether or not you're communicating well in those situations that you're really looking to get your point across. The definition that we're going to use is taken from a textbook called In the Company of Others. It's published by Oxford, and it's written by Dan Rothwell, who is a fantastic scholar in communication courses, and he's written a fantastic textbook. Now, although I don't use this textbook anymore in my courses because it's a little expensive for many of my students, I do think the content of this textbook is absolutely fantastic. So if you're really interested in communications, see if you can find yourself a used copy of this textbook. Now, the definition we're going to use is almost exactly like the definition in the book, except I changed one word. And so let me give you the definition. Communication, for our purposes in this course, is going to be a compassionate, transactional process of meaning making. That's, one more time, a compassionate, transactional process of meaning making. It sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? But it's funny to note that a lot of these words, especially the idea of compassion and process and even meaning making, is, well, they're words that are kind of complicated because we tend to hold different definitions for each of these items. But let me go through them one at a time so that we can understand this a little bit better. Now, in The Company of Others, Rothwell suggests we should have an empathetic approach to communication. But I come from not only a communications and rhetorical background, but also a philosophical background. And so for me, empathy is not the best word to use. And let me explain why. Ultimately, empathy means that we are feeling into someone, feeling into their experience. Now, we can't do that with a stranger. No, we really can't. We can imagine in our own brains maybe what they're feeling or expressing or experiencing, but we can't actually know. We can never truly feel into that person because, well, we don't know that person. We're basically making assumptions off of our own experiences in life. And that's something very different than truly feeling what somebody else is feeling or walking in somebody else's shoes. So for me, the word empathetic is probably not the best term to use for communication definition because it really limits us to face-to-face experiences that we're having with people that we know really well. And most of our communication in life is with people we don't actually know. You know, we pick up the phone, we talk to customer service. We don't know the other person on the other side of the line. We only have a little bit of information for them. So empathy doesn't quite work. And either would, I would argue, sympathy, a word that we often use interchangeably with compassion, empathy, and sympathy. These are three words that we just go back and forth with without really spending a lot of time thinking about the definitions. So if you look up the definition for sympathy in the dictionary, you'll find feel sorry for, feel bad for, right? So when we feel sympathy for somebody, it's usually we're imagining, oh, if we were in that situation, God, we would feel really bad about it. So again, it's us projecting our feelings, our knowledge, our fields of experience onto somebody else. And we don't really want to do that when we're communicating, because then we're saying, hey, you need to feel and think and be exactly like me. And that's not what we're looking for when we're looking for a good definition for communication. So sympathy is feeling at a distance. And when we feel at a distance, we're really not engaged in the moment. For example, I may feel sympathy for a factory worker working in a different country, making my iPhones. Maybe I've read an article about how these people work ungodly hours, they're not given breaks, they work till exhaustion, they're paid almost nothing. I can feel sympathy for that experience, but I can't feel empathy because, frankly, I've never had that experience. I'm very lucky, I'm very blessed. You know, I've worked in a factory before, but we had breaks, we had decent working hours, decent working conditions, and, you know, actually the pay was better than what I have ever made teaching. So I can't truly have empathetic feelings for the factory worker. I can only feel sympathy. And that leaves us with compassion. For me, when I've looked at the word compassion throughout my lifetime, I realized that it is a feeling at a distance and a feeling into at the same time. For me, compassion is empathy plus sympathy equals compassion. That would be our formula, if you will. Compassion gives us the space to feel for somebody at a distance like we do when we're sympathetic towards a situation. But it also gives us the ability to feel into somebody, have that empathetic quality between yourself and the other person. So compassion, I think, is the best word to use for our definition for communication, simply because it gives us the best worlds of both empathy and sympathy all together. If we have compassion for somebody, we're also willing to find out about that person. You know, sympathy, there's an ending. I feel bad for that factory worker. Oh my God, it's terrible. Oh, what did you say? You want to go out to pizza? I'm on it, let's go. Okay, maybe that transition doesn't happen so fast. But if we're in a space of compassion, we can look at the factory worker and I can go, I feel horrible. You know, I'm going to find out about their conditions. I'm going to take the time to really find out about what's going on in that particular factory. And if I am able, I'm going to go talk to the factory workers to find out how they really feel instead of assuming how they feel. See, now that's the road of compassion. Compassion allows us to have that sympathetic opening, but it compels us towards the empathetic reality. So if we have the ability, then we are going to be able to get out of our chair, go talk to that person working in a factory, and kind of get the truth about what's going on. That's the compassionate move. And so with all communications acts, we really need to take the time to be compassionate. We may be brought into the moment through an act of sympathy. There's a homeless person, I feel bad for them, they're homeless. But our act of compassion might take us from that feeling from a distance to walking up to the homeless person and saying, hey, are you okay? What do you need? What can I do to help you? So that's the first part of our definition of communication, is this word compassion. The next word that we have is transactual. Now, the word itself feels complicated until we kind of take it to its core and just think transaction, because that's what we're talking about. Transactions, negotiations. That's what we're doing when we communicate. I say something to you, you maybe not understand what I have to say clearly, so you go, oh, do you mean such and such and such and such? And I go, yeah, that's it. But also, I'm thinking about this thing over here. These are transactions. You and I are going back and forth to try to make meaning. We are narrowing our scope of understanding so that you and I can somehow communicate better. It's as simple as that, transaction. So transactional process, transaction, and then process. Process. Process is probably one of the most important elements of this definition besides compassion. Oftentimes, when we are communicating with somebody, we're thinking about a set ends. And what I mean by that is, I have this point I want to make, and so I'm going to get it across to you so that you understand me, and that's that. That's an end. That's a goal. That's what we want to achieve. But when we jump to what we want to achieve, and we forget that there's a transactional process happening here, then we don't engage in the process. And it's super important to understand that all negotiations are a process. Life is a process. And if we jump to the ends, then chances are we're going to get there, but we may not get there the way we want to get there. May be that we have an argument because I didn't deal with the process of having transactions with you about meaning. Because I just jumped at the end. I want you to know this, and that's it. So when we think of communication, well, kind of like we think about life in general, we should think about processes. And we should also think about practices. It's the 2 P's, process and practice and process, because that's what living is all about. And that's what communicating is all about. It comes down to practice. It comes down to processes. So we have transactional processes of meaning making. And meaning making is really just you and I finally coming together and holding as possible as it can be the same meaning for an idea, a term, a concept, a situation, our conversation. And it's difficult for Americans, actually, to get to this transactional process of meaning making, because as Americans, we are really encouraged to bring our own meaning to our lives. That also means our own definitions. Now you may say, no, that's not true. Why do you think we have a dictionary? Why do you think we have a thesaurus? And you would have a point, you really would. But how often are you using the dictionary definition of any idea or word? We use words that we don't even really have a set definition for. For example, the word freedom. I say the word freedom, and in your head right now, you go, I know what freedom is. But I'm going to challenge you to sit there and give me a definition that could go into a dictionary. And then compare that definition to a dictionary definition. And then ask your friends, your family, to write down their definition of freedom. And it's also it's important to write down examples too. Because freedom is a concept that we're arguing about right now in our country a great deal. Example, mask wearing. There's a lot of people who feel like the mask mandates infringe upon their personal freedoms. And then there's a group of people that say, hey, I gain more freedom, I can go more places, I can interact with more people if I adhere to the mask mandate. So you have 2 very different views of freedom here and personal freedom. One is based upon this idea that if I do good and I wear the mask and I think about my community, that gives me more personal freedom to interact with the community. And the other argument says, nope, my personal freedom is my personal freedom. You should not be asking me to take care of other people because that's not my job. So what we have is 2 very different ideas of freedom here. And this is just one example of how we, as what I would call individualists, because that's what many Western societies are. We are individualistic people, and in the United States, we tend to be extreme individualists, and as a result, we often hold different definitions for concepts and ideas and words, such as freedom. So when we're in the act of communication, it really behooves us all, myself, the person I'm talking to, whether it's a group, like I'm giving this video to a group, right? Or if I'm talking to somebody individually, as we're going through the transactional process of meaning making, one of the things we need to do is make sure that we all hold the same definition of the concepts that we're talking about, or we open the door for a great deal of miscommunication. And hopefully this kind of dissecting of this definition of communication as a compassionate, transactional process of meaning making has been helpful to you today. We're going to talk about other aspects of the communication process, including the communication model and the importance of recognition regarding communication noises. And these are going to be coming up. Until then, have a great day, and I hope all your communication acts are good ones. Aloha.